Down here, we are not going to be on electronic devices, so Chromebooks, phones, everything put away. Because the information we have is important. I do want to recognize some special guests joining us this morning. To my left, your right, we have our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Raymond Haynes, a Phoebus graduate. Give him a hand. Everybody give him a hand. There you go. We have our School Board Chair, Dr. Richard Mason. We have Mr. Jason Samuels, a proud Phoebus parent. Mr. Joe Kilgore, another school board member. Dr. Jen Oliver, Director of Community and Government Relations. Ms. Kelly Gurl, Director of Communications. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Trina Hatcher, Director of Student Support Services. All right, this morning we have an important presentation. As I told you earlier, I expect you to show your greatness and your attentiveness during this presentation because you were, again, chosen to be down here. We have Agent Hartig from the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, to give you an important presentation of some issues going on with youth your age and some preventive measures we need to take so you are aware of what's going on. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to him.
Good morning. I hope all you are well. Morning. I just want to say, first of all, thank y'all. First off, I want to say thank you for allowing us or giving us the opportunity to come here today and speak with you this morning about this very important topic of fentanyl. And I want to thank the school board and the school system, your principals and your superintendent, because it really means they care about your future. Them letting us in here to give this information means they care about you, and it's really, really important. My name is Patrick Hartig. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Administration in Norfolk. I've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years now. I was a police officer in Chesapeake for several years. I worked in vice and narcotics. After I hired on with DEA, I worked on the southwest border in Texas. I've worked in our Special Operations Division, working in international investigations, and I've worked both in our Hampton and our Norfolk DEA offices. And I can tell you in my entire career, I've never seen a threat more deadly than fentanyl. And as young adults and students, that's the environment that you're living in. Someone is overdosing or being poisoned every single day in Hampton Roads. You may not read about it or you may not know about it, but it's happening every single day. And you, as juveniles and young adults, you're the most susceptible because you're young. You don't have a tolerance. You likely have never used drugs before, and that makes you more likely to take a pill or a drug that can kill you. And that's what we're talking about today. We're not talking about drugs that will get you high or make you feel good. These drugs will kill you, and that's how important this message is today. Just quickly about the DEA, we're the Drug Enforcement Administration. If you're not familiar with us, we're essentially the Federal Police Department for all things drugs. All we work, investigate are drugs, guns, money, and violence. So I'm confident when I talk to you this morning about this information. This information is from our investigations. It's from intelligence that we've generated. So it's accurate and it's true. Everything I'm going to tell you today is accurate and true. And we hope that this isn't a lecture. We really want this to be information for you to make a good decision about your life, so that you live to be successful, so you have a successful career and a family. Because you live in a world now where you take one pill, one mistake, and it could end your life. That's how serious this issue is. What is fentanyl? Fentanyl is a Schedule II synthetic opioid. What that means is there is a medical purpose for fentanyl. It's typically prescribed for end-of-life care or severe pain. All the fentanyl we're going to talk about today is not medical fentanyl. It's all street illicit fentanyl. That's the fentanyl that's causing this crisis. It's not medical fentanyl. It's all the fentanyl that's being sold on the street. It's far more potent than morphine, sometimes 100 times more potent than morphine. Very, very dangerous. The precursor chemicals come from China. It's produced in Mexico, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. The side effects. It has a significant depressant effect on your respiratory system. When you die from a fentanyl poisoning or an overdose, Your brain basically tells your lungs to stop working. You essentially just stop breathing, and you don't even know you're doing it. There's so much fentanyl in your brain, it blocks your brain from telling your lungs to function. You just stop breathing. There are 840 theoretical fentanyl analogs. What that means is, from a chemistry perspective, there are 840 different versions of fentanyl. If you change one molecule, it's a completely different drug. And that's something you should be concerned about in today's modern society, because you're growing up in a world where everything is transitioning to synthetic drugs. Eventually, in the near future, there'll be no more plant-based drugs. Right now, we have marijuana and cocaine. They're basically the last two plant-based drugs. We already know there's synthetic marijuana, and we also know that there's experimentation with synthetic cocaine. When both those drugs transition to purely synthetics, there'll be no more plant-based drugs. It'll all be synthetic. And that's why it's more dangerous for you, because it's all made in a laboratory. It's not something you grow. When you grow something, you can only control the environment so much. You can only make that drug but so potent. If you're in a laboratory, you can do whatever you want. You can add chemicals, change molecules, make it as dangerous as you want. And that's important for you to know, that we're transitioning into a world of all synthetic drugs. Where do the drugs come from? How does it get here to Hampton? This is how it happens. All the precursor chemicals necessary to manufacture fentanyl come from China. There are over 100,000 chemical producing companies in China capable of manufacturing the precursor chemicals necessary to produce fentanyl. And they produce it cheap, pennies on the dollars. All those chemicals, precursor chemicals, come from China. They're all smuggled into Mexico. Once they arrive in Mexico, they're transported to these clandestine laboratories that are controlled by two Mexican cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel. The vast majority of fentanyl in this country comes from one or two of those Mexican cartels. And what all of you need to know about these clandestine laboratories, and everybody in the community needs to know, is that they are filthy, disgusting, unregulated, uncontrolled laboratories. These are not real scientists working in these laboratories. The objective is mass production and profit. They don't care about the quality of the product. They just want to produce it, smuggle it into the United States to sell to you and your families. And because they don't care about quality control, it's a contributing factor to why people are dying. If you're talking about counterfeit pills, you could have one pill that has 0.5 milligram of fentanyl in it. You can have another that has 10 milligrams of fentanyl in it. There's no way to know how much fentanyl is in that counterfeit pill or in that powder of fentanyl. There are two forms of fentanyl, counterfeit pills and powder form. Once it's manufactured in Mexico, it's then smuggled into the United States. Remember when I said you're not going to know how much fentanyl is in each counterfeit pill? This is how we know from our investigations. An example is there were two teenagers, same age as all of you, here locally. They both bought what they thought was a counterfeit oxycodone pill from the same drug dealer. Two friends. One of the victims knew about fentanyl, knew the dangers of it. So that person decided to take 1/2 pill. His friend took a whole pill. They both overdosed. Who do you think died? The 1/2 pill. The 17-year-old, same age as you, who took 1/2 pill of a counterfeit oxycodone pill, had enough fentanyl in it to kill him. He's 17 years old. He's dead now. 1/2 pill. Once it's smuggled into the United States, it's all transported from the southwest border directly here to Hampton. This is different than it used to be. In the past, as part of our investigations, these drugs would be transported to what we would call transshipment cities, like Houston or Baltimore or Atlanta. And these organizations would basically increase the volume of these drugs by adding other substances. But when they did that, it would dilute the product. It'd make it less potent. But they're not doing that anymore. The drugs are coming directly from Mexico, directly here to Hampton. If you see a counterfeit pill our fentanyl that came in Hampton, it came directly from that laboratory. No stopovers. Directly from the laboratory, directly into your neighborhood. And it's something you have to remember in terms of the dangers. Last year, the DEA, we seized nearly 70 million counterfeit pills and over 11,000 pounds of fentanyl. And what we know from our chemical testing is of those counterfeit pills, and it varies between 5 and 7, but 7 of the 10 pills that we seized have a lethal amount of fentanyl in them. That's 2 milligrams. If you're not familiar with how much that is, it's a tiny, minute amount. Only 2 milligrams is enough to kill you. And 7 out of 10 of those 70 million pills had enough fentanyl in it to cause an overdose or a deadly poisoning. It's in these pills. 2 milligrams is a tiny, tiny amount. We also know now that the leading cause of death for Americans, 18 to 45, is a drug poisoning or overdose. That's more than guns, and it's more than vehicles. Fentanyl is killing more people than guns and more people than vehicles. And we also know over the last couple of years in Virginia, the overdose and poisoning rates for juveniles, has continued to increase. Because again, like I said, you're the most susceptible. It's continuing to increase, which is why we're here today to educate and to talk about this issue so that you know the dangers. If you remember one thing from this presentation, I'd like you to remember that you can only take a pill if it came from your physician and was dispensed to you from a pharmacy. If it came from anywhere else, I promise you it's a counterfeit pill, and it probably has fentanyl in it. And it probably has enough fentanyl in it to kill you. Only from a doctor and only from a pharmacy. If you have a pill and it didn't come from a doctor or a pharmacy, it has fentanyl in it. I can tell you that with confidence based on our investigations. We are seizing hundreds of thousands of pills at a time. They're out there right now, only from a doctor and only from a pharmacy. There's a video. Might need some help getting the video to play. Okay, sorry about that, but we got it to work. We played that video to emphasize the point of how dangerous this crisis is. Think about that. If it was one sugar packet, one tiny sugar packet, if it was fentanyl, can kill 500 people, right? That's far more than everybody in this auditorium, probably close to half of your school. And that's just a sugar packet, tiny sugar packet. So we played that video to put the crisis into perspective so you understand how dangerous this is. Tiny, tiny amount. The one thing about these Mexican cartels and these drug dealers, they are very, very good at counterfeiting pills. Very, very good at counterfeiting pills. You will not know the difference. We as DEA agents, we don't know the difference. Our DEA chemists don't know the difference. You're not going to know the difference. These are two pills, counterfeit oxycodone pills, M30s. One is real and one will kill you. Do they look similar? They look similar. Would you know the difference? Which one do you think is the actual pill? Right, so the yellow is the fake pill. That's the pill that will kill you. And again, just 2 milligrams is enough to kill you. Tiny, tiny amount. I'm going to tell you a sad story. It's for one of our investigations that happened here on the peninsula in terms of how dangerous fentanyl is. We were conducting an investigation that involved a house that was distributing fentanyl. A family lived there, including the 2-year-old. The 2-year-old was exposed to fentanyl because fentanyl was being distributed from the house. The 2-year-old wasn't using fentanyl. It was just absorbed or inhaled. And it was enough fentanyl to put the 2-year-old on life support for 9 months until the 2-year-old died. Just from being in the house with fentanyl. The 2-year-old died, tragically. And that happened here, locally. When I first saw this graphic of the 2 blue pills, I actually thought the one on the right was the real pill. Because that pill looks more legitimate than the actual one, doesn't it? So again, you're not going to know the difference. And then, obviously, that's how much fentanyl can kill you relative to a penny. So this is what we're talking about, tiny, tiny amounts. You also have to understand it's not just painkillers. That's a misconception. These drug cartels are counterfeiting all kinds of prescription drugs, including Xanax bars. These are Xanax bars. One's legitimate, and one has a lethal amount of fentanyl in it. The one on the right is the fake pill. You're not going to know the difference. And what this has caused us as a community is it's created a new pool of victims of poisonings and overdoses. I'll give you another example. We know of a woman who was a domestic abuse survivor. She was not a drug addict. She didn't use drugs. She didn't suffer from substance abuse disorder. She was a domestic abuse survivor. But because of that domestic abuse, she suffered anxiety and depression. To treat her anxiety once, she called a local drug dealer and she bought what she thought was a Xanax bar. It wasn't a Xanax bar, it was a fentanyl bar. And 2 hours later, she was dead. She was not a drug addict. She was a survivor of domestic abuse who bought a pill that she thought was Xanax, but it was a fentanyl pill. And I only tell you these stories to emphasize that you're not going to know the difference. If it doesn't come from a doctor or a pharmacy, you can't take it. We're also talking about Adderall. This is very important for y'all to understand because this is a trend among young people and young adults in terms of Adderall. Young adults and young people like yourself are taking Adderall because they think it'll serve as a stimulant, specifically to help them study in college or in high school, to stay up late and cram for a test. And we know this is happening. Kids your age who want a stimulant will buy an Adderall, but it's not an Adderall. Because again, these Mexican cartels are counterfeiting all kinds of prescription drugs. So these are 2 pills. One's legitimate and one will kill you. It's Adderall. The one on the right is a fake pill that will kill you. So if you're ever in a situation in college or in high school and you feel like you need a stimulant to study or to whatever else is going on in your life, do not take an Adderall unless it comes from your doctor or a pharmacy. It's not going to be legitimate. It's either going to have a lethal quantity of fentanyl in it or methamphetamine. So it's important to remember, as you continue to grow up and develop, don't take any pills that aren't from a doctor or a pharmacy. I also like to give examples of local investigations that we've conducted so that you understand it's not happening somewhere else. This is happening right here in Hampton Roads, right here in Hampton. This is an investigation we conducted. That's 13 kilograms of fentanyl. 13 kilograms. If you're not familiar with a kilogram, it's about 2.2 pounds. So that's about 27 pounds of fentanyl. Each kilogram has 1 million milligrams in it. How many milligrams can kill you? 2. That's 13 million milligrams that we seized right here. So that's what, 6.5 million lethal doses from one seizure right here in the Hampton Roads area. So it is out there. Please be aware. That's 10,000 counterfeit oxycodone pills. 10,000 of them. And what was the statistic from earlier? How many pills out of 10 probably have a lethal quantity in them? 7. 5, between 5 and 7. So of those 10,000 pills, 7,000 of them have a lethal quantity of fentanyl. And that's not even our largest seizure. Our largest seizure is over 100,000 pills at once. One time. That's what's in your community. That's a kilogram of fentanyl. And we show you this slide so that you understand that it's not just fentanyl that these drug cartels are distributing. They are also putting other drugs into the fentanyl to get you addicted, to get your family addicted. It's not just the fentanyl. When we seize a drug, we have to send it to our laboratory so that we have chemical testing required so that we can prove what we charge somebody with is what we actually seized. That is a copy of the actual chemical analysis from this kilogram of fentanyl. The top line is the chemical term for fentanyl, or one of them, and the bottom line is xylazine. Does anybody know what xylazine is? Anybody? It's what? It's a tranquilizer. So we know from this chemical analysis that not only is this fentanyl, but it's also xylazine. Xylazine is a tranquilizer that's not allowed for human use. Veterinarians use it to sedate large animals for medical procedures. Nobody should be using xylazine. It's not for human use. But here it is in the fentanyl in Hampton Roads. And xylazine is immune to Narcan. We'll talk about Narcan in a minute, but Narcan is a chemical that reverses the impacts of opioids. It doesn't work on xylazine. Has anybody seen a story about the drug that actually rots the skin off your bones? That's xylazine. So not only is it dangerous enough for fentanyl, but these drug cartels are putting xylazine in these drugs. It's also important for y'all to know that you're growing up in a world that no longer has experimental drug use. And I say that because all the drugs we're seizing, it all has fentanyl in it. And we know that from our chemical analysis. We seize drugs, we send it to the lab, we get a report that says what it is. So we know for a fact that we're finding fentanyl in heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, K2 and spices, marijuana, and it's also in vapes. It's in everything. You're not going to know, you're not going to smell it, you're not going to detect it. It's definitely in marijuana. We've conducted an investigation. There was 10 overdoses in a matter of a week. 4 of them were fatal. The only thing all 10 victims had in common is they were chronic weed smokers. They smoked weed, it had fentanyl in it, and 4 of the 10 died. So you have to be aware that there is no more experimental drug use. Fentanyl is in everything. That's what these drug cartels are doing. Social media, it's very, very important. Everybody in this room and this school, I'm sure, knows more about social media than I do. But it's important to know that these drug cartels, they're on social media with you. But they're not there to talk to you. They're there to recruit you, to sell you drugs. All these emojis are being used. You can buy and sell whatever drugs you want. If you have the right app and the right connection to the internet, you can buy drugs, pay for it with your phone, and get it sent right to your front door if you want to. That's dangerous. I'm telling you not to use any drugs that you don't get from a pharmacy or a doctor. It's even worse if you get it online. You have no idea where it's coming from. Prescription drugs are not sold online. That's not the way it works. We also know that these cartels, they have unlimited resources. It's a billion-dollar industry. They have algorithms that run in the background of these online chats. They're looking for certain phrases and terms in these online chats. And when that happens, this algorithm will create an alert. So if you're online, you're chatting, and you say something to the effect of, I don't feel good today, I'm depressed, I hurt my ankle, that will trigger an alert to these drug cartels. Then they will private message you and offer to sell you drugs. Those drugs will not be legitimate. None of it's legitimate. So remember that when you are online. It's very dangerous. Those drug cartels are online looking to recruit you so they can sell you drugs and ruin your life. We also know these cartels are marketing specifically to you. These are seizures that we made here locally. Those pills on the left, I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I'm not even sure what they were trying to sell. Maybe ecstasy. They look like vitamins. Those are fentanyl pills. The ones on the right are multicolored tie-dye M30 oxycodone pills. There's no reason to make a pill look like that unless they are trying to sell it to you or your younger brother or your younger sister. They don't need to make a pill look like that. They're just trying to make it appealing to you to sell it to you. Quickly about Narcan. If you're not familiar with Narcan, Narcan is critically important. Everybody should have Narcan. It's a chemical that can save your life, and it's saved thousands of lives, undoubtedly. Everyone should have access to fentanyl. Very, very important. But we also need to warn you about certain situations that we're aware of based on what we know. And it has to do with young people your age. At a party or some other social event, and someone has a counterfeit pill or drugs, and they also have Narcan. Please don't use Narcan as an excuse to use drugs. Narcan is not guaranteed to save your life. And we know this is happening. We know people are using drugs because Narcan is available. And they think someone's going to give them Narcan and it's going to save their life. That is a mistake. Because what happens is that someone will take a drug, a counterfeit pill, they will overdose. Everyone with them panics. They don't know what to do. No one administers the Narcan. And what ends up happening is they pick up the victim, they drive the victim to the parent's house, they drop the victim off on the front porch where the victim dies. Nobody helped them. It's happened multiple times in several investigations. So I'm telling you, Narcan is very important and we should have it and it should be properly used. But please don't use it as an excuse to use drugs. That's a mistake. This is a billboard from a fentanyl awareness campaign that we created here in the Hampton Roads area. And I think the message is pretty clear. But it also leads to our next presenter. And I'll ask you to please pay attention to Shannon. It's really, really important. Because she's here with the courage to tell you her story in the hopes that one day you'll remember something she said and it will save your life. So please pay attention to what Shannon says. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to introduce you to my daughter, Michaela. We're from Virginia Beach. She went to Ocean Lakes High School. In 2021, she started her first job as a lifeguard, age 15. Here, she met somebody who introduced her to pills. I discovered in December of 2021 that her boyfriend had overdosed. I immediately attempted to stop contact with him. I assumed if he was doing them and they were always hanging out, that she's at least tried it. It created a lot of hate and discontent because at 15, nobody wants to be told they can't hang out with their boyfriend, and parents don't know anything. She stayed with her dad for the month of December. She came back to my house in January. January 7th, she turned 16. January 21st, we watched a couple movies. She went to bed. We said goodnight, I love you. January 22nd, I went to wake her up that morning and found her unresponsive in her bed. She had been 16 for 2 weeks. When I walked into her room, she was cold, she was stiff, she was pale. She had stuff coming out of her nose and out of her mouth. I immediately called 911. My neighbors ran over to start doing CPR. But I knew the moment that I walked into her room that it was too late. At the age of 3, she started gymnastics. She was a competitive gymnast. She was a competitive cheerleader, honor roll student, respected and liked by her friends, adults, made good decisions until she didn't. She knew the dangers of drugs. We didn't know about fentanyl. My fear was her becoming addicted to drugs. It was not her dying from drugs. She thought what she got was a Percocet, and what she got was 100% fentanyl. She should have graduated high school last year. She should be in college with her friends this year. She never got her driver's license. She never graduated high school. She's never going to fulfill all her hopes and dreams that she wanted. And she had a lot of them. She wanted to go to UVA for law. At one point, she wanted to be a gymnastics coach. She thought she was going to go to the Olympics. She trusted the wrong person, made a bad decision, and unfortunately, that one decision cost her her life. She doesn't get to learn from her mistake. But I hope by sharing her story that you can learn. That you can learn from her mistake. That you can graduate high school. That you can go to college. You can get a full-time job. You can move out of your parents' house and get your own place. You can date, you can get married, you can have kids. You cannot do any of that. But it's your choice because you're here to make it. People knew, her friends knew. Nobody said anything. When asked, people lied and denied it. And I get that. As a friend, you don't want to get your friend in trouble. But at some point, you have to decide if getting your friend in trouble or them being mad at you is worth not saying anything and possibly saving their life. I had a month from the time that I found out till she died. People knew in October. Had I known earlier, maybe I could have made a change. Maybe I could have gotten her help. Maybe she'd be here telling you her story of recovery instead of me telling you her story of what she wanted to do. Michaela's best friend normally comes to speak. However, she was sick this morning, but we do have a video of her sharing her story. Thank you.
Excited to go play in the snow with her the moment she had woke up. I will never forget how that illusion was then shattered by my front door slamming open and Shannon shouting that Michaela is dead. I will never forget the way my heart had been ripped from my chest and I could not breathe anymore because Michaela couldn't be dead. That's not possible. I will never forget standing out in the freezing cold trying to work up the courage to walk next door to see her for myself. Because I had to see it. I needed to know. I was hearing things. At least that's what I thought. I will never forget watching as the cop car and the ambulance pulled up. And I'll never forget running back to my room. Because a small voice in the back of my head was telling me that I heard it right and that I did not want to see it. I would not be able to handle seeing it. I will never forget after all the ambulance and the cop cars had left and my mother had came over and confirmed that it was true that Michaela was dead, standing on Shannon's front porch trying to comfort her, except I didn't know what to say or what to do to make it feel better. Because how should any 15-year-old know what to do in that moment? Today I am here to talk about how important friends can be and the damage it can cause if you know your friends are doing drugs and choose to remain silent. It was October or November of 2021 when I had found out Michaela had started doing drugs. I even took some with her, instead of telling a trusted adult what was happening. After Shannon had found out, she had questioned me if I had known, and I lied every single time. I thought I was being a good friend by keeping her secret with me. I didn't want her to stop being friends with me just for ratting her out. I thought I was protecting her, but I wasn't. It was my actions, or better put, my lack of actions, that ended up being one of the reasons that she had died. I may not have been the one that started her on drugs, or even supplied her with them, but not stepping up and telling someone that she was doing them played into her death. The Thursday before she had died, she had called me and asked me to come over because she had gotten more drugs and for me to come over and take some with her. I did. I had taken the same pills from the same batch that had killed her, but I lived. Now I have to live every day with the guilt that if I had been the friend and did what friends should do and spoken up, informed her mom or my mom, she might still be with me today. But I chose to say nothing, and now today you are listening to me speak. I get to wake up and live every single day, but she cannot anymore, partially because of me. It will always be difficult, but I have to move on with my life every day, carrying the guilt on my chest and heart. Being a good friend is not letting your friends make decisions that you know are wrong or bad, and that is not just including drugs. Because that's what a friend does. A friend is someone, despite losing their best friend, speaks up and gets the help that they need. A true friend wants to see their friend live a happy and successful life, whether they are in that life or not. I will gladly accept if Michaela and I are no longer friends today, knowing that she is here, alive, well, and fulfilling her dreams and aspirations because I had spoken up. If you know someone that is struggling with substance abuse in any way, ask yourself, do I want to see my friend get hurt or die just because I want to be their friend still, or do I speak up and help them get the help they need? I now have to live every day where instead of just walking next door and talk to Michaela, I now get to live every day with her hanging around my neck.
All right, that's a pretty powerful story, you think? And hopefully you realize the real-life consequences from how dangerous this drug is. So we appreciate all of you taking your time today and listening to us. Hopefully you learned something, and you have the information you now need to make good decisions about your life, because it's critically important. Do we have time for questions? Or does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and I hope all of you are well. Thank you.